Welcome to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein, talking about the evolutionary, the revolutionary, the inspiration and the perspiration, and those aha moments that change everything. And now here's your host, Rich Goldstein.
Rich Goldstein here, host of the Innovations and Breakthroughs podcast, where I feature top leaders and the path they took to create change. Past guests include Rick Cesari, Bob Serling, and Louis Foreman. This episode is brought to you by my company, Goldstein Patent Law, where we help you to protect your ideas and products. We've advised and obtained patents for thousands of companies over the past 26 years. So if you're a company that has software, a product, or a design you want protected, go to goldsteinpatentlaw.com, where there are amazing free resources for learning about the patent process. And you could email my team at welcome@goldsteinpc.com to explore if it's a match to work together. You could also check out the book I wrote for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. I have with me here today Kenneth Tyler. Kenneth invented continuous composite three-dimensional printing, one of the core technologies involved in modern 3D printing, and he co-founded the company Continuous Composites. For Continuous Composites, he has helped develop a patent portfolio of over 250 patent applications with over 50 patents already granted. Kenneth is also the lead investor and IP strategic advisor at KRAMBU. It's a company that sells high-powered computer servers that are used in blockchain, AI, FinTech, and other fields with demanding computer needs. It's my honor to welcome here today Kenneth Tyler. Welcome, Kenneth.
Hey, thanks, Rich. I'm honored to be here.
So in the introduction, I mentioned a couple of companies that you're involved in that are having great success. But I know you had an early experience with a company that was on the cutting edge of payment technology, but it didn't quite work out that well. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, and so the company's name was Pay That Way. And I like to say that was my first real shot at a startup. And it was a lot more like people would envision as far as, sleeping on the futon in the lab with a microwave and,
and a hot plate.
We created the world's first mobile Bluetooth credit card reader that worked through your cell phone. And before the days of Square, smartphones were only like maybe 30% of the market. So we actually made it work through any phone, any flip phone, which sound ancient as I say that these days. So that was about in 07, 08. But yeah,
wait, you made it to work with any flip phone. How could it go wrong? It worked universally.
And which was a very big challenge. There's times, we're pulling all-nighters and we have hundreds of phones around, and we're testing this product on all these different phones because they all have their own little quirks. And so anyways, some of the big accomplishments there was, we were a small group of guys, and we literally built this piece of hardware on our own. I mean, from reflowing the circuit boards that we etched out on a CNC machine to programming and marketing and then selling the product. And we had clients and we had a product, but then Square came to market and we just got annihilated. We couldn't compete with a big guy. And on top of that, we faltered on IP. And that I wasn't the inventor in that company. The owner of the company was Ryan Malloy, and so we just didn't have that IP centric focus like at Continuous Composites. So it was a real big lesson for me there after working so hard. To see in a way. I mean, it was a failure as a business, but we did succeed in building the product. And I took the lessons from that company and moved forward. And I actually, as I came back home, that was in Boise, Idaho, I started building boats for Standcraft after that, because my background's in both computer science and also craftsmanship. I've built a lot of amazing things in the woodworking industry and boat industry, composites. And so anyways, I really took the IP side of things to heart, and we played around with 3D printers a little bit when we were doing the Pay That Way startup with a credit card reader. But at the time, 3D printing wasn't even really a term. It was rapid prototyping. So we went to the rapid prototyping lab and used a stereolithographic apparatus at the Boise State University facility there. And it was a 3D printing that it was the more SLA style, where it's just a resin and UV light and a resin bath, and this part just kind of starts to show itself as it emerges from this liquid. And I was fascinated by it. I'm a big CAD designer. I use SolidWorks and have for almost 20 years now. And that's what I've always loved is the idea that you can it relates to how I've worked with things with my hands, but to be able to draw something in 3D and then have it be made in front of you was just mind blowing to me. But we realized the limitations pretty quickly later that day when we had the part in our car, and on a 7-degree day, we got back from lunch and it was melted and limped over.
Oh boy. And
so we had got back to the lab and used a hair dryer to kind of shape it back to what we needed. It's like, okay. So, it was later then when I was building boats, and, in the boat, I'm in the high-end boat industry, so we're using the best materials, and I'm watching the 3D printing industry and the maker movement happening, and they're melting, thermoplastics. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, man, this is so crude. It's just melted plastic basically being drawn on to itself. And at the same time, I had stabbed myself with a single piece of fiber from a layup the night before. And so if people aren't aware, the composites industry there's a lot of limitations around what you can make with conventional composites. It all revolves around molds, and you build these molds and you lay the fiber up over it, and then there's lots of post-processing, yada, 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 a lot of waste. And to me, it just struck me as wow, this is crazy. This single strand of fiber, this is so strong. Why are we not 3D printing with this? And so I started my search. That's where I started just getting erotic about it, frankly. And I started doing patent searches, and it was just, I couldn't find anything. And I was like, okay, I filed that first patent on my own. I wrote a provisional, and then went on my quest to find legal help to work with. And so, it was, so I'll just keep going. By the way, I can just talk and talk. So jump in at any point. And so that was really interesting, because here I was, just a regular guy building boats, now, trying to convince people I have this world-changing technology. And man, that's a big pill for someone to swallow,
Yeah.
And so
how did you jump out of the mindset of being the guy who is innovating something, being the guy who's in engineer technical mode, over to the business side of things and the relationship side of things, and realize, like, how do I get this out into the world? Yeah.
And so, I believe that all the greatest things happen from, a team of people working on them. Ideas start with one person, but all the greatest projects I've worked on, it always takes a large team. And so I was looking for people to work with right out of the gate. And it was really difficult, until a group came around called the Innovation Collective. And they just happened to be starting up around the same time I was trying to start this company. And they'd have these like coffee and concepts and things where you would get people coming together who all want to try and do something new, right? So now, instead of, at first I had contacts and I was going to businesses and talking to people, but you go to a composites business, and you try to tell them you have this new technology that's going to make what they're doing somewhat obsolete. And it's like, that's tough, but, through this group, I was able to meet, some attorneys, who were willing to help me with, the business side of things. And then, other engineers and a machinist. A real notable, help early on was Marty Mueller. They run a makerspace here. He and his wife, and a really amazing couple. They're the type that they invented the IMAX camera, and just brilliant machinists. And so, working with him in the early days to get the first prototype going, so that I had something that was real enough that I could, I was making parts. I actually used the CNC machine from the previous startup. The one thing I got to keep from that company was the CNC machine. And so I yanked the router off and put this new end effector on the end of it, which is our first 3D printer, and built, which is still till today the most simple 3D printer on earth. The least amount of moving parts besides the gantry and the positioning. It was just a UV light, and the fiber would pull itself through a resin bath, and I was printing with carbon fiber and fiberglass. So later, it was at a business meeting. I ran into an old friend of mine, John Swallow, very accomplished businessman, and it was at like a luncheon, and my attorney had invited me to this table. And John just happened to be there, and he's someone that I knew when I was in college. One summer I worked on his barn, so he was some kind of like a family friend in that sense, that we did a lot of work for him. And so anyways, he's taken companies public, very sophisticated investor and businessman in the mining industry and drilling industry. And he had another business partner, Tyler Alvarado, who is now our CEO. And this guy is just brilliant, sharp, quick-witted, and he's running the company now. CPA, MBA, really high energy. And these guys were both very, very sophisticated with business. And so,
that was the magic match right there. Is like you had the investor and the guy who was actually going to eventually replace you as the CEO, kind of moving the action forward of the business. Yes,
sir. And and that was and that whole transition, man, is that tough when you go from the company literally was my life for a while. I was running it. I was running myself into the negatives way further than I or my wife would have liked to have acknowledged, right. Financially. And so they literally made the business happen. And so
they saw what you had, they saw what was possible, and they jumped in. And then that kind of brought you from being the kind of the guy who was running a little bit in the negative space into debt, to a guy who was flush and then was able to invest in other companies.
Yes, sir.
What was that transition like for you?
Wow, that's still a bit surreal even today. And so, we just kept growing the company, and I can't talk a lot about our contracts, but obviously we have some revenue and contracts there. And so as the stock price grew, John, he always says he says, it's good to make a little money on your way up. Don't sell everything, of course, but don't be afraid to make some money on the way up. And so, so I sold some stock off here and there. And, but I was really pragmatic about it. I didn't want to just go out and buy a sports car or a fancy boat. And so I invested into both real estate and this other cryptocurrency company, a GPU company. And so
now you're making computers.
Yeah. And so now we're building computers, and I'm mining. I'm mining, all of the time. And so on the side, which is brilliant to me, because what I loved about of CNC machines and robotics is anytime you can have an automated process that's doing work for you, and you're generating a return. And mining it makes that happen in the most simple means possible.
Right. You set up a computer to do some transactions, and then it's making a little bit of money at a time.
Yep. As long as those GPUs are running, you're getting a return. You're just looking for cheap power and cheap maintenance, and awesome. And and 3D printing, that's really close to where it makes a part for you. But you still have your post processing and everything else, and your design. I mean, there's a lot more there. So, but I love the idea of automation for making things and doing work.
Yeah, and so let's go back a little bit. So when you created that first Provisional for continuous composites, like what value did that do for you? What did that create for you, and what do you think that create for other inventors in a similar situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really important to get that first provisional under your belt before you start to really go out and talk to a lot of people. It just gives you a little more comfort in that you have your stake in the ground on that invention. Even though you're likely going to need to work with a real patent attorney, which I did to make the non-provisional patent. It gives you that year to go out and look for partners and look for people who will believe in what you're doing. And so that's kind of.
Absolutely. I totally agree. The one caveat I always give is that the priority you get from the provisional is only as good as it is well written. So that's something that people need to understand. Mm-hmm. And just further talking about that. So with regard to IP and IP strategy. So you've taken this IP strategy role to file more than 250 patent applications for the company. So what value has that created for the company at this point?
It's created a lot of value because, like we say, the first patent's like the castle, but then we wanted to build the moat around the castle. And so there's some other major IP there that's also foundational, but most of it is supporting IP, supporting the original invention and all the different ways it can be used. So from product applications to other mechanisms and things within the invention itself, software and hardware, both. And so what's fascinating about the continuous composite technology is we're not only able to print with any continuous composite or typical composite material you would expect, like fiberglass, carbon fiber, Kevlar, or aramids, or whatever. We can also print with conductive materials and fiber optics. And so it's truly revolutionary for composites industry, where we can now discreetly embed, nichrome wires. So we 3D print out a heater, or we embed fiber optic, and you have sensing technology now. And you could sense the wing moving and the air currents on it, or if there was a crack or a break. And so, as you can imagine,
that's like straight out of like Star Trek. Like,
it's
being able to replicate something, to be able to actually 3D print like a working circuit, essentially.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and three-dimensionally, or a working electric motor or electromagnetic system. And so it's really game changing in that space. And so there's a lot of different ways it can be used. A lot of implications in aerospace and defense. And so that's where our primary focus has been as a company, is to do these really high quality, high fiber volume prints that will stand the tests of the aerospace industry, and keep US with the leading edge in technology that we should have. And so it's really interesting what's happening there. But then, on the other side, there's a lot of really practical uses in automotive and sports and things of that nature. One of the patents we talk about, like you could have embedded fiber optics in your skis, and as you ski down the hill, you could have an app and connect it to it and have real time feedback of your turns and as you go down the slope. And so, there's
all the different possibilities are creating opportunities for patent filings. I mean, you're seeing applications, and you're proactively going in the direction of those with patent applications that are pursuing the applications that you see.
Yep. Yes, sir. Yeah.
And it sounds like with this portfolio you're creating of IP, that's creating leverage that makes it so that other companies, much bigger companies, are working with you, and that's the reason they want to work with you. And I know there's some high profile partnerships that just come about. Do you want to talk about some of that?
Yeah, I don't know how much
you can
say. So
Hi.
I like to leave that to Tyler. What I can talk more about is on the side of the IP strategy, that wasn't mine as much as John and Tyler's. I was so excited to have a couple of patents, right? And I thought I was doing great. And when I met John and Tyler, and they were like, Kenny, they put me on a salary, and they put me in a nice office at their company, McAllister, where the company was incubated. And they said, Kenny, we want to build this moat. Try and come up with as many patents as you can. And I was lucky to be working with an amazing patent draftsman. And so, it's all very important work to work with a talented patent agency and draftsman. And if it wasn't for Ryan Stockin, his ability there to just, draft a profuse amount of inventions and in those early days, I don't think we'd be where we were. And so,
Yep.
So that, sorry, I just wanted to follow up with that there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I just want to look at resilience a little bit, in the sense that I know, like with the first company that we started talking about, the payment company, it didn't quite go so well. And then, but you went ahead and you pursued a second venture with Continuous Composites, even though things didn't go quite so well. I mean, what do you feel is it that kept you kind of with the notion of inventing something and pursuing it as an entrepreneur? Like, what is it that had you feel confident to do it again, even though things weren't going so well with the first one?
That's a great question. I don't know. I always have been kind of, I had this do or die kind of mentality. But, put it all on the edge. I've lived my life that way for a long time, I suppose. And so, being a carpenter in the high-end industry, and I have to stress the things I built, from $15 million homes to, $1 million boats. That's where I worked most of my life. And so I was a lot of times meeting these people who had done these amazing things and made it big. And the common theme was they had all been on the ground level or started a company. It wasn't as much lawyers, doctors, or what you'd expect. And some of them, it was really silly things like a cookie company or, and so I had to get my shot. Right. And so, I just,
So you were inspired by others and how other people were able to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and just make something work.
Yes, sir. And I think that's something really unique to America's ability to do that. That any regular person can literally make something like this happen is really remarkable. And like I said, I wasn't making a lot of money when I was building boats. I'm just a blue collar craftsman, and at times meeting billionaires and whose boats I was working on. I built things for everyone from Wayne Gretzky to Dennis Franz, and which was really cool. I really enjoyed the work, but it was grueling, and there's not a big future in it, unfortunately. And so I always knew that technology is where I wanted to be, and robotics. And because I studied computer science, but I didn't finish school. And so without a degree, you kind of have to, strike out on your own. You can't just go get the job and do what you think you're good at, or, and so that was part of that as well, and so.
So you took, you took the skills that you had, the knowledge that you gained. I mean, your skill as a carpenter, like, and a fine level of detail to things, and then being able, and also being able to see kind of what would be helpful in fabricating things. And that's kind of what created this desire to have this type of technology. And it sounds like some magical meetings with the right people to kind of to be able to adopt your vision and also have the wherewithal to help bring it out further than your current skill set could.
Exactly.
And you put all that together, and it brings you to where you are.
Sounds so simple.
Yeah, it sounds amazing and inspirational. And the cool thing is by talking about how you're able to do it, it helps inspire other people that are also, like, they're not lawyers, they're not doctors, they're blue collar people that have just a vision of something that they think the world could use, and that you're helping to inspire them that they could do it as well.
Yeah, I all my best ideas come when I'm working and building something. I'm in that flow, and I'm getting dirty and I'm carving wood, or I'm whatever it is I'm doing, and just you get into a flow, and you allow your mind to go, and they just kind of come. I don't know where it comes from, but it's beautiful, and that drive. I mean, I just couldn't believe that it wasn't being done, and I knew it was important, and I knew if I could be involved in any possible way with such an amazing technology, I'd do whatever I could to make it happen. A book that had a lot of influence on me when I was in college was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert M. Persig. And he talks a lot about quality and how there's a lack of quality in a lot of life these days. And it was that search for quality that sent me down the path of working in the real high-end industry in construction to begin with, and then the boat building, and I try to get that through with the technology as well, and everything I do, because I think it's really important, and I think it's something that in our mass marketed products, and today there's just such a deluge of things, and we've lost a lot of quality in things, and so that's part of it too. As I was looking at them melting plastic together, and I just was like, man, I know there's a better way to do this.
Yep. A better way in terms of more efficient, and also better quality. Like you said, it's like there is a de-emphasis of quality in a lot of realms these days, and so it's like you brought that fine craftsman level of detail into this, and this is what it became. So congratulations on kind of cracking the code of what works and what worked for you. And I think it's an awesome story. And if people want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, how do they go about doing so?
Searching for me through LinkedIn is great. And then you can go to continuouscomposites.com and KRAMBU.com to learn more about those companies. And there's some really exciting news articles and things on the Continuous Composites website right now. So.
Got it. Well, thanks so much for sharing your story. Thanks so much for visiting the show. And hopefully I'll get to see one of these machines in action. And I'd really love to see something get created from the ground up, literally.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's video out there.
Well, that's an easier path then. Well, thanks again, Kenneth. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks a lot, Rich. I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
Thanks for listening to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at innovationsandbreakthroughs.com, and we'll see you next time.